What kind of engine is this?
Alice.
Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. I gave the clear coat an extra day to dry. That way it's completely hardened. Feels really good now. Moving on, we're going to start installing the crank tonight. Cleaning out the journals with some mineral spirits. Get it completely nice and clean. We'll install the bearings and then go ahead and drop the crank in. Once that's done, we'll get this thing flipped over and we'll gap the piston rings and start installing them. So let me go ahead and set up the camera and we'll start cleaning the crankshaft now. Alright, I think I got the crank journals pretty clean. So the goal here, right, is to get them as clean as possible. You don't want any kind of contamination. The rags that I usually use are these low lint glass rags that they have for glass. Scott's makes them. You can pick them up at like any auto parts store. So theoretically, right, you got a clean rag. You want to be able to wipe the journal and have nothing come off, right? It's just completely clean, which it is. Last thing will be just to hit it with some compressed air inside of the oil journals, just so that I don't I don't have any particles in there. And then we'll move over to the block and get that done as well. All right, we're here at the engine block. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to go ahead and clean every journal till I don't have any dirt or lint anywhere. All right, we got the mains pretty clean. What I like to do is I'll take one of the old main studs and I'll just run them in just to make sure that there's nothing that's going to mess up with my torque specs. Also, I can take a look at the threads and see if there's any dirt or oil. That way, if I need to clean it one more time, I can. And once that's done, we'll go ahead and grab our main bearings. Here, I'm going to go ahead and clean them really well. We'll start sliding them into position. And from there, we can go ahead and put the crank in. Alright, now that we have the main bearings in, the upper half, we can go ahead and apply some assembly lube. I like to use this Ultra Slick. What you want to do is just go ahead and lay it down like that. Don't worry if it gets everywhere. You just want to go ahead and coat the bearing. Go ahead and do each bearing. This stuff is super slick and super thick, and You just want to make sure that the bearings are coated really well, and you'll be good. Alright, I got the crank all lubed up with the Ultra Slick. It's right over there on the ground, and we're going to go ahead and set it in place now. Once it's set in place, we can put the main caps on. Alright, so we're installing the main caps now. You see the notch in the cap. You can align it with the notch in the bearing right there. And just set it in place. And slide it in. So you get an even surface on both ends. I'll go ahead and put a little Ultra Slick right here and install the cap. Alright, so I got all the bolts pretty much hand tight in place, and so the first pass for the main bolts is 15 foot-pounds. Once that's done, you're supposed to tap the front of the crank and then the back of the crank to kind of set the thrust bearing in place, and then you can go ahead and do the final pass on the bolts, which is 80 degrees. Alright, so the second pass on the outer studs is 51 degrees. Let's get this all set up. And we are going to start number 11, it looks like, this outer one. I'm going to turn that. We're going to zero out our gauge to there. Okay. And 51 right there. Alright, last but not least, here's the side bolts on the main caps. These are torqued to 18 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and set our gauge to it. Perfect. All right, crank is in and rotating smooth. I don't feel any hang-ups. Really nice and smooth. All right, let's start putting the pistons together now. All right, we got our number 8 rod here, and just gonna get that all lubed up. Same with the wrist pin. our piston. Just gonna slide in that way here. Get the exhaust and intake there. And so we got one lock in already. I'll slide this guy in like that. Through the rod, it should just go nice and smooth. Just like that. And then I'll go ahead and install the wrist pin lock now. Once that's in, right, it's gonna slide into the cylinder just like that. So I'll go ahead and put the other lock in and then get all these pistons done, and then we can start gapping the rings. All right, so the pistons are completely assembled. Wrist pins are in, clips are in, and what I started to do is I have the piston rings here. You can see the box. First ring, or first groove, second groove, and third groove. Third groove are going to be your oil rings. First groove is for your compression, and you got your secondary compression ring. So before I can install the pistons, I need to measure the gap on the rings, and you can see I got them in place already here. Nothing there. I'm going to show you how I install it. Nothing special. So I got them all in place, and what you do is, here goes the top ring. Top ring has a dot on the outside edge. I don't know if you can see it there. There's a dot right there. Okay, and I'm gonna take the ring and I'm just gonna slide it into place just like that. Okay, and then I'm gonna grab one of the pistons, number 8 piston. I put a ring on it already, and here it goes here. Got the piston on there, or I got one of the rings on, and I'm going to use it to center the new compression ring. So I'm just going to slide it down. It goes, it just stops it right until I know it's centered in the bore. And now what we can do is you take your feeler gauge and you measure the gap in the ring itself, right? So there is a formula, and I'll have to look it up and see if I can post it. All right, I got the second rings in place. Grab the piston, and I'm just gonna punch it down so that it centers the ring in the bore. Just like that. There we go. So they're all centered within their bores. And now I can go ahead and grab my feeler gauge and see what these are at. I believe these should be within 18 or 19 thousandths. So I'll go ahead and check that and get right back. All right, so I'm gonna walk you guys through the process of file fitting the rings. So it's supposed to be 18 thousandths. No, it's a little too tight. Right, it's more like, let's try 16 thousandths. Nope. It's more like 15th. Okay, so let's get my 18 thousandths gauge out. All right, so I'm gonna pull this ring out and I'm gonna file fit it. Got my file set up here, and trying to keep the end of the ring flat on the file, going inwards towards the ring. Okay, let's check that. I just got my tiny file to get rid of any burrs. Nice. All right, I'll take it. These are all 18,000s now. Perfect. Perfect. All right, so second compression rings are fit, and so I'm gonna install them in the same order. Check mark means they have 18,000s end gap clearance, ring gap clearance. So these are all good to go. Other side is good to go as well. And we'll go ahead and start installing them on the piston now. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start installing the piston rings. First, we'll start out with the oil rings. So typically, what you have is you'll have the wiper and basically two spacers, one that goes above and one that goes below. And it's gonna go in this third groove here. So what you want to do first is on the fence here, you can see that it's pointing upward, the two ends. I don't know if you can see that or not, but they're pointing upward. And I'll go ahead and run it around just slightly by hand, just like that. Then I'll align it up with the wrist pin, and then to index them, what I like to do is I'll have one spacer kind of at the skirt, the other spacer at the opposite side of this skirt, and then I'll go 180 on top and bottom ring. They do move inside of the cylinder when the engine's running. This is more so for startup purposes. All right, guys, so I'm gonna attempt to get the the upper compression ring with you guys. I got the lower one on. I have it facing the skirt, and I'm going to put the upper compression ring on the opposite 180 degrees from the lower compression ring. So there should be a dot on the upper ring, and that's it right there. I don't know if you guys can see it. So I'll go ahead and get this lined up. And there's no rush here. Just try to guide it in is all we're trying to do. Just like that. All right, now that we got the piston rings all loaded up, we'll go ahead and start cleaning these bores out one last time. And I think I'm either going to use transmission fluid, just because it's a good detergent, or some of the mineral spirits to give it one last wipe, put a coat of engine oil inside of each bore, and then we'll go ahead and compress the piston rings and get them down into each bore that they go to. So I'll set up the camera. We'll do that now. Guys, so I got all the pistons in on the passenger side. Driver's side has all pistons in except for the last cylinder. We're going to do that together. That's how she looks so far. Everything's coming together pretty nicely. Alright, so let's go grab the last piston. Alright, so here she is here. Ready to go, label number 7. And typically what I'll do is, I'll set up the camera before I do it, is I'll take the cap off and then kind of really give it a good cleaning, make sure there's no dirt or dust on the inside of the journal here before I slide the bearing in. And then we'll use the ring compressor there, ratchet it down, use the back of a hammer to slide it into its last bore. So I'll set up the camera and we'll get started. With this ring compressor, kind of got to watch it, make sure that you're centered inside of it. And I think I'm pretty close. Alright, so I'll go ahead and grab it, kind of bring it straight down to the bore, just like that. We want to make sure that we're kind of aligned inside of it so that we don't have any problems. Pistons in. Now we'll grab it from underneath, slide it into place, and put the bearings in it. Alright, so got the engine on its side, and what I'll typically do is get my bearing ready. I'll go ahead and wipe it clean. I know it's brand new out of the box, right? Doesn't hurt. And we'll come in here, lift that up, and we can slide the bearing into place, just like that. Okay, now that the bearing's in there, grab some hyper or the ultra slick, a couple dabs, get my brush, and I'll wipe the bearing, the ultra slick. Make sure it's completely coated. Okay. Now we can go ahead and slide the piston into place. Just like that. Take our rod cap and I'll wipe it clean as well, make sure there's no dirt inside of the cap. That's clean as well. Doing the same thing with the final lower bearing, rod bearing. Just cleaning it. It only takes a second. Doesn't hurt. So we're gonna go ahead and slide our bearing right in there. Just like that. Ultra slick. And just brushing it in, coating the bearing. Now we can go ahead and install it. I'm just threading these in by hand for now. I have I'll flip the engine over so that get these all torqued down to spec. There we go. Done deal. All right, guys, got this thing flipped back over. Everything's torqued down. Up next, we got the cam ready to be installed. So what I'm gonna do first is take it out of the bag. You wanna clean even a brand new cam really well. You never know how long things have sat for, what they've been exposed to. So we'll take the cam out, give it a good cleaning, and then install it. Got the cam all cleaned, ready to go. So this is a custom cam by GP Tuning over Matt over at GP Tuning. It's a 615 intake, 615 exhaust with a 113 LSA. That's something that that he spec'd for me, or for this build. All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna use the Ultra Slick on the back half here, start sliding in, and then add Ultra Slick towards the front half as I go along inside of the block. Now what I use at the front of the camshaft is the water pump bolts. The factory water pump bolts that fit in there gives you just enough leverage to slide the cam in without bumping every cam bearing. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Add the last bit here. This should be enough to get us the rest of the way. All right, there we go. Cam's installed. All right, now that the cam's in, I went ahead and slid the lifters in place, put the trays on. Just gonna torque the trays down. 106 inch-pounds is what the going rate is. All right. That's snug. Now we can go ahead and put the gaskets on, or the head gasket on, and we'll install the passenger side head now. Okay, got my head gasket. Just gonna set it in place. Front, it's labeled. And let's get the head. Set that in place. All right, passenger side head is in. All right, guys, so up next is going to be the timing chain setup. And I have this comp cam this comp cam kit, LS timing chain. I'll put the part number in the description. So what you got to do first, I got the piston, number 1 piston at top dead center. The dot is facing the 12 o'clock. And I use the puller to pull the keyway out. So right now the keyway is out. So I just pulled it. I'm going to take the harmonic balancer bolt back out and start to install the new keyway that comes with the kit. Alright, sprocket's in, retaining plate is in. I have the crankshaft pointing at 12 o'clock. Here goes the cam sprocket. It's going to be pointing down at 6 o'clock. On this system it has a washer thrust bearing. So just need to align it all up. 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Off 1 tooth. All right. Should be it right there. I'm just gonna hold it in place. Alright, got every bolt tightened down to 25 foot-pounds. Double check now. Alright, timing chain is completely installed. Everything looks good. Now we're going to go ahead and rotate the motor a couple times just to verify that we don't have any problems. Let's get it back in. All right, up next is the oil pump. So before I go ahead and put the oil pump on, I'm just gonna take a little bit of oil. All right, oil pump is good. Now let's finish off this passenger side head. I'm gonna torque it down completely, and we can either do like I said, driver side head or windage tray and pickup tube. So first things first, let's get the passenger side head completely torqued down. All right, passenger side head. We got the torque sequence here from ARP. First pass is 25 foot-pounds, second pass is 50, final pass is 80 on the larger 13 millimeter, and then the top, the 5 10 millimeter bolts all get torqued down to 25 foot-pounds at the end. All right, so first pass, 25 foot-pounds. Here we go. All right, first pass is done. Second pass is 50. Got my larger torque wrench for the final 2 passes. And final pass is 80 foot-pounds. Let's jump up to 80. And final pass of the top 10mm bolts is 25 foot-pounds. Good. All right. Passenger side head is done. All right, guys. The driver's side is ready to go on. I have the dowels here. Just gonna pop these back in place. And go there. I have both mating surfaces completely wiped clean. Shouldn't be any issues there. Got our factory gasket. Pop that guy on there. Front facing the front. Here goes the head now. Alright, driver's side head is on. I'll go ahead and get the ARP head bolts lubed up. Get those in and torque this thing down. Alright, we got the valley cover that needs to be installed. So because he has the fast intake, it comes with these button head bolts. So you get proper clearance. So I'm just gonna snug these guys all up and then torque them down to 18 foot-pounds. And we should be good. Alright guys, so up next is gonna be the front timing chain cover. Got it here. And what I did is, I know you can buy the tool. I went ahead and 3D printed it. I'll have a link for it in the description below. If you have a printer, you can print one yourself. Literally just fits over the crank snout, just like that. And grab the gasket. Basically, it's just gonna center the front timing chain cover for you. That way, you know you're lined up with the crank perfectly. No issues. We're gonna get these in place. So this is the same tool that you can buy for $30. I went ahead and 3D printed it. If you have a 3D printer, probably cost a couple, I don't know, maybe 40 cents. Right, so we're gonna snug them all in. Needs to get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. And once these are all torqued, we can remove the tool and you should be good. All right, see if the tool worked. Yank that out and we are perfectly centered. Go, let's just zoom in. So again, I'll have the download link in the description below if anybody wants it. Also, the tool worked for putting the oil seal on too. front seal. Just tapped it in, slid right in, good to go. All right, so I'm gonna flip it over. We'll put the windage tray on and the pickup tube and the oil pan. All right, it's time to install the oil pickup. And you'll notice I have one stud that's open because that's where the pickup bolts to. So I'm just gonna grab a little bit of oil and just lightly lube the O-ring here so that I don't cut it as I install it into the oil pump. All right, now that everything is installed, before I put the oil pan on, I just want to rotate the engine a couple times, make sure there's no interference. Alright, everything seems smooth. There's no rough spots. You typically want to do this before you put the oil pan on. Close this thing up and not have to worry about whether or not something hits or not. At least you know that, at least for the most part, you're in a good spot. So up next will be the oil pan. Alright, it's now time for the oil pan. I'm just gonna put a small bead at the meeting points for the front cover in the block and the rear main seal in the block. So just a small dab, just like that. We're gonna cover up the seam on all four corners. And then we're gonna lay it down in place and torque the block, the pan to block bolts and front cover bolts 18 foot-pounds, and the two long bolts that go into the rear main seal to 106 inch-pounds.